Hi, this is Pranav Sharma, second year in BTech AIML, and my topic for the Ideathon is the crime detection camera, which comes under the theme of smart city. So, yeah, we'll be for this explanation, I'll be going through the idea, the evolution, the constraints, and the conclusion. Right. So the general idea of the crime detection camera is to establish an artificial intelligence software that can detect and alarm the authorities on whether there's a crime happening or is about to take place. Right. Moving on to the evolution on how this the surveillance cameras actually came into place. In 1787, an English philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, came up with an idea for a prison that would cost a fraction of the cost of actual prisons in that time. And his theoretical prison, which was called the Panopticon, was curved, and all the cells of the prisoners were faced towards the center, towards the center point where a guard tower would stand, and the windows of the guard tower would be darkened on one side so that the guard would could monitor over the prisoners, but the prisoners wouldn't be aware of the guard. And the end result of this idea was that the prisoners had like a sense of being watched by some other person because of the presence of the guard. And yeah, so this idea, because of this idea, many people had come up the idea of coming up with a surveillance camera had sparked up, and in 2010 many companies had tried implementing Bentham's idea towards surveillance cameras. And yeah, moving on to 2018, where a company called Zero Eyes had had marketed a system where they could basically scan for a person carrying a gun or not. They could distinguish whether a person would be carrying a firearm on themselves or not. And this was a huge push towards the surveillance cameras and the crime detection camera as a whole, because this wasn't introduced in the past as well. So like in 2019, Athena's security systems had come up with a system where they were distinguished like from the rest totally. They had set another level where they were giving where they had distinguished themselves through object and facial recognition. And what they had stated was their system would recognize specific behaviors like fighting or walking slowly rather than everyone walking faster, and virtually anything that like differs from the norm. And yeah, this was the evolution of how the surveillance cameras and the crime detection camera actually came place. Now, how the idea of my idea of the crime detection camera, how is that going to be unique? So there will be like firstly, it would be a combination of all of the three systems that I had mentioned before. It would be a combination of the behaviors system, the temperature system, the scanning system, and we would also add an alarm to it so that it would directly inform the authorities on whether there is a difference in behaviors or temperature or anything that differs from the normality, right? And then additional features from the combination would be the system would be ideally programmed to learn based on past data and act accordingly. So we would be adding an AI towards it. I know that an AI was already implemented before, but this AI would basically learn from this past data and try to implement it towards the current situation, right? Then prediction. As we're already including the AI system with the camera, it would have the potential to predict the crimes that will take place in the future. Right, so let's talk about the constraints. So the constraints for this system would be crime, for mainly crime, and we have to define what crime actually is and explain to a system on how to differentiate between normal behavior and criminal behavior. And yeah, the scale of this could be large, and depending on the scale, it the constraints would increase more because the more inputs, the more load on the device. Then the emotional intelligence, the AI would obviously need some previous data towards the emotional intelligence, but we have to also set an example on how to differentiate on or how to understand that one person, two people are just like playing around instead of actually like fighting against each other, right? And then speech recognition. And one thing that could be avoided, one thing that could be added towards the previous technology is that we could add a speech recognition towards the camera where it can understand the speech, it can understand the dialogues that is being occurring between the two individuals, between the set of individuals that are being involved with the crime, and based on those dialogues, it can interpret and detect whether it could be a crime or not. Yeah. So, in conclusion, the crime detection camera is definitely implementable, but considering the constraints required for the system and the scale that it requires to work efficiently, it would take up a lot of time and a lot of resources. Right? Thank you for this.